Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You are listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
All right, welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the mindset world. I say I do this podcast because I've been blessed over the last couple decades to work with some of the best athletes, coaches, teams, and leaders in the country. And I love to share what I've learned from them. And then when we're lucky enough to have a guest, learn from them as well. As most of you know, recently, Coach Jess Connected has been doing a lot of the podcast jointly with me to have her explain through her lens and ask questions through her own way to get to even a deeper connection with our guests. All right, our guest today has over 20 years of coaching experience. I can't even tell you how much she's been in the volleyball world, but I mean, she played college volleyball at Arizona State, and if I understand right, she's in the Arizona State Hall of Fame. VolleyCentral.com named her the National Player of the Year in 2000. I know we're going back a ways, but AVCA All-American. She's been a high school coach, a college coach, an assistant college coach, currently the director of RVA, Revolution Volleyball Academy. She's which is a club in Arizona, high-level elite club. She's also the head coach of Sandra O'Connor Volleyball, which we'll get into. Something I didn't know, that she is a previous state champion in 2005, 2006 at Desert Mountain High School in Scottsdale as a head coach. So she has lived the volleyball world for a long time. She is the current state champion of Sandra O'Connor Volleyball, which was their first state championship in school history here just less than 1 week ago. Welcome, Amanda Burbridge, to the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always say is that my definition of maxing out is given the talent, the experience of the athletes and coaches, the health, the depth, the intangibles. Can an individual or a team reach the limits of their capabilities? And then can they do it under pressure? Because I always say if you can't do it when it matters the most, what's the point? What's your definition of maxing out?
I think it's different for each player and each team. Based on the level of the team, I think there's different levels of what maxing out means. I think for us this year at O'Connor, maxing out for us really, I think, took shape in terms of their deep connection and trust for each other. And that led us through really tough moments. So when pressure was on, when volleyball maybe wasn't at our best, that's what we always kept coming back to, was staying connected, staying close together, keeping eye contact, and being really honest with each other. And so for us, most of our pregame came down to just staying together through anything that might come towards us that was tough. And so us maxing out was in pressure, staying united, staying really true to our core values. And as long as we had that and we were holding each other close, literally, that was us maxing out, and it led us to really good things.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome, right? We always say at Max Out Mindset, you have to have the talent to compete for championships, but it's not the talent that determines how far a team goes. And you did not mention a single volleyball skill in that definition of maxing out. Not one. You meant connection and trust and eye contact and staying together. And of course, you can do all those things really well. And if you don't have enough talent, you're not going to win it all. But it is those things that we've experienced over the years that give a team a chance to win it all. And it's so cool when a coach can put it into terms that you didn't mention any of the volleyball skills that obviously you had a high level of, But obviously in your career, you've played at all different levels. You've coached at different levels. You've won at different levels. Is there a common theme at all that you've seen in your other teams that prior to Sandra Day O'Connor, because we want to talk about that journey, but I'm going to let Coach Jess do that with you. But leading up to that, are there some similar journeys that you've been on where the non-volleyball skills were things that your team did really well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common theme for any of the teams that not only did well, but enjoyed the season. And not all seasons have to come with a lot of wins for it to be enjoyable. Obviously, that helps. But you can even have a winning season that is not enjoyable. So yeah, I think that, having those, it's just kind of, it all goes together. It kind of puts you over the top, because once you have the athletes and you're doing the training in the gym, and that's been consistent, where I'm going to push them in the gym, I'm going to make sure the training is what it needs to be for them to reach their goals that they have set. I know that that's my responsibility. The scouting reports, making sure I hold them accountable for doing whatever's in that scouting report, reminding them like, hey, remember we talked about this? Oh yeah, that's right. And then the next step that puts us over the top is our ability to really stay connected and supportive of each other from the sideline. The players that aren't on the court are just as important as the ones that are on the court, and keeping all of them, working together towards whatever the goal is that day, but certainly the season goal. And that's the commonality is the connection between not just the people on the floor, but the people that aren't on the floor that show up in the practice environment and get after it and crush it and go hard at each other. And that makes us better every single time we're in the gym.
Yeah. And again, we always say that everybody has to be valued top to bottom. And it starts with the coaches, the team leaders, the captains, the experienced players, to make sure everybody feels valued, and that things such as role acceptance and building those deep connections matter. For some of you who don't remember who Coach Jess is, Jess is she's been a volleyball coach for over a decade, multi-sport athlete in college. And in the past year and a half, decided that she wanted to transition to the mindset world and train mindset. And as joined in partnership with me, this is her first year that she's actually worked with individual teams in the mindset world outside of being a coach. So this is Coach Jess's journey with Coach Amanda here. Yes, I met with her team a few times, but this is Coach Jess being the mindset coach for Sandra Day O'Connor. And so I want to turn it over to Coach Jess, because I really want to have you two have a conversation about the experiences that you had this year together, what you both learned from all of it, and then ultimately putting it all together that resulted in, the best thing in the world, in my opinion, whether you're there live or on videos watching that court rush when a team wins it all. So, Coach Jess, what are your thoughts?
Well, Coach Amanda, what a journey.
Yes.
Just almost like a week out freshly, 7 days later, almost 7 days later. And, I just really want to circle back to probably late summer, right? Nationals had just got done. You're prepping for your high school season. I want to know when you decided to make mindset a priority. And I want to hear when, as an athlete, right, when you noticed that was something that was valuable to you as an athlete, which, by the way, Doc didn't mention this stat. I hear you were an Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year.
It was.
So you understand level, you understand demand, you understand success, and you also understand failure. How did mindset play a role in that? And then when did you decide as a coach your team needed something like that?
That's a great question. It's going to take us back to when I was 10, 11, 12 playing softball. I had a coach who was a former Marine, and he taught us visualization. We did a lot of visualization. Like, we had 3 practices a week. We did it every single time. If it was raining, we would meet in a hallway by the softball field and visualize the entire game, like games of visualization. And we were 10, 11, 12. So that seed was planted really early. I also knew I wanted to coach at that age. That was what I always really wanted to do. I loved the process of it. I loved figuring out why coaches did. And I was that player that always asked why, like, why? And coaches were able to, not see that as disrespect, but I'm genuinely wanting to know. So visualization has always been a part of the way I've coached. All of my teams since the beginning of my coaching did visualization. I've always known that mental component was really important. I've going into this season, especially after having, maxed out last year in the club environment, I knew that there was a lot of things that I didn't know and on the mindset front. And I knew that I wanted help and, figuring out that you can't do it all as a coach and that you're not supposed to do it all. And that bringing in someone like you and Doc and this program was going to be, whether we won or not of a state title was not in my thoughts. I had just, this is my third year at the program, and there was a lot of culture shifts and resistance. Definitely the more upperclassmen as I came in, just, it's a changing of a lot. And there was that resistance piece there for me. And I knew that going into this season, I really wanted to get the help that I needed to help kind of get over that hurdle and really unite all the players. You've got 4 classes, freshmen through seniors, and I really wanted to have a really positive experience regardless of what the outcome was. I wanted to bring this to them because I know how important it was for me as an athlete. And what you guys do and how you do it is so cool and unique. And I knew that it, I hoped that it would do what I hoped it would do. And that's just really unite the players and get them all under one O'Connor banner.
And let's take it back 2 years ago, right? You were state playoffs. You ended up going against the team that you played in the championship this year. Well, you played him at Perry High School. It was the second round of playoffs, and that result, unfortunately, ended in a loss. Why did mindset seem important this year? And I know you said talking about, keeping them unified, but what else? It took a lot for them to buy in. You had a lot of personalities. It's a brand new concept as well. What made the decision that you're really going to buckle down?
I could see last year some of our, key pieces, struggled under pressure. Whenever it was really crunch time, higher pressure matches, we were not able to stay together. We definitely divided. And there was so much self-doubt and a lot of self-criticism. These guys are so hard on themselves. And that's all. When I figured out that through max out, we train confidence, we train composure, we train how our brain can handle competition and how I can be a better teammate, how I, as a coach, need to help with role clarity and finding my own connections with players. Once I figured out all that, I could see looking back that we never had it. We just last year never had those tight connections. And we didn't have that self-confidence and we didn't know that self-talk was so powerful. And I could look back and remember facial expressions and body language and team language, body language, and you could see it fall apart. And I knew right away that was going to be the key to all. I wanted to bring it to each one of them because they're all such really good athletes and they're smart. Holy cow, you should see their grades. I knew that they were going to be able to really wrap their heads around what we were trying to do. And at the end of the day, if I just brought it to them individually and that helped them be a better person and athlete and teammate, then goal accomplished. If it resulted in more, even more, that's just the gravy. That's the cherry on top. But ultimately, it was an investment in each one of them to be a stronger young woman.
And, I thank you for trusting Max Out Mindset, Doc, and I want to ask, is the volleyball team, the girls volleyball team, the only team at the high school that is training mindset consistently?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. How was it for the experience of your administration watching this process? I was very thankful to meet all of them, but I think it's a testimony. If those girls and your team and your program didn't buy into this training, it wouldn't be successful. It is about your athletes and your coaching staff. And I'm just curious of the feedback you received from your administration.
Admin loved it. So their comment to me was, let me know what we need to do to keep Jess. And I was like, got it. Yep. I'll tell you what we need to do. I've also had numerous coaches come up and ask me about what we're doing and if it's different. I know they've asked admin, like, does everybody get to do this? I definitely know that, what they saw was really different. And some of them don't get it still. We're like, they're just like, wow, you guys are so tough under pressure and your team has so much energy. And, how do you guys do that? And what are you doing? And you just must have really special players. And I'm like, yes, we have special players, but we worked our butt off mentally. We had to do a lot of things that maybe we'd never done before as a teammate, as a coaching staff, as a coach. I mean, I've been doing it for a while, but I definitely am learning how to do things better, different, adapting to, different generation. And I think it's fun, honestly, to see how they work better and they think different. And that's awesome. I actually really enjoy that is so different. It's challenging to figure out how to reach them and to connect with them. And I like little puzzles, I guess, like that. So it's fun for me to get, new tools. But yes, the feedback on campus has been really good. And I know that, a lot of coaches are really interested in an admin. Even after the state final, he was like, all right, next year. And I was like, yep, you ready to know what you need to do to get Jess? I was like, we're not doing this without her. So, and he was like, yep. So yeah, that was really cool to get such positive feedback from admin. Parents too. I mean, it's just been really nice and solid feedback.
Well, and the reason why I bring up admin is because your program made history and you made the first, girls state champion to bring back to O'Connor. But I think you set an example of what a possibility looks like when a program chooses to intentionally train their brain and to train their mindset. Doc and I always talk about your mind as a muscle. And the more we train it, obviously we're better equipped for these situations you talked about. I want to talk a little bit more about growth through adversity. And I want to run it back to playing Sunny Slope, first match, maybe beginning of the year. And then I'll toss it back to Doc as he came in on a couple Zoom calls with us. But Amanda, can you tell us, one, what happened in that Sunny Slope match? And then how that was the big pivotal moment that adversity hit, but your team chose to grow from it.
Yeah, I mean, I consider that the best loss I've ever had. It literally changed.
What'd you say?
Best loss we ever had.
You can have a great loss. All right, go on. I'm intrigued.
It definitely sent us in a trajectory that I don't think we necessarily would have gotten to so early if it hadn't have happened early, I guess, is part of it. What we identified after that match, I mean, we were so unhappy with the loss, but it was like, what do we need to do and fix it? Because we didn't want to feel like that again. We knew we could do better than that on a volleyball level. And it was just like, what happened? And so when we broke it down in mindset, I think Katie was the first one that just said it was so chaotic. She's like, it just felt like we were all out of control and she was like, you guys, somebody would come in and be like, let's go. And I'm like, dude, Katie's like, I would just tell them, hey, calm down. And the other one's going, well, pick it up. And they just could not figure out we could not get on the same page. And you saw just individual separations and everyone just kind of doing their own thing. And there was no real connection. You could feel it. And it surprised us because we had been doing the work and we were really mindful about continuing to train hard and doing the mindset. But until we had that loss, I don't think we understood how to use our tools. We had them and we knew we had them, but we didn't quite know how to apply them because we hadn't lost yet. We hadn't really dealt with the adversity of not doing well. And what we were able to break down with you was, I swear, the biggest thing was our numbers. We talked about that intensity of play number and we got everybody's number. We had our 8, 9s, and 10s, myself included in that group. And then the majority were kind of 6 and 7s, and our average number was 6.9. And it was like, we all just went, it was like an aha moment. It was like, oh, well, no wonder Katie, my 6 was like, dude, calm down. And my 8s and 9s were like, let's go, pick it up. And you could see where they just literally banged into each other. And they were all trying to accomplish the same goal, but the way they go about doing it is completely different. And they finally in that moment said, I'm going to let you be you. You go be 6, 7, whatever. I'm going to go be me. And we're going to love each other right through it. And I'm super excited to see you max out at an 8, 9, 10. And I'm going to go max out at my 6, 7. And let's go win things. And there was no more. They understood in that moment that they were all different. And they were all going to compete differently. It was going to look different. It was going to feel different. But they were all going to understand that that person was just as dialed in, just as locked in, just as driven, powerful, and unified. That so they were just as committed to the core values of the group. It just looked different. And they let each other be who they were. And it was magic. It was just awesome to see them be authentically who they are with no judgment. That was the thing that came up with the team. They're like, I never feel judged. I can just share and be who I am. And sometimes that's scary, but at the end of the day, they were willing to do it and risk that moment. And it led them to just a real deep connection. That was the pivotal moment, I think, for us, is when we finally just said, you be you, I'll be me, and let's go do stuff together.
I was just telling Doc about that exercise, and, to catch everyone up to speed, that is something that was specific for your team. And it was the same thing of getting that feedback. Slope just caused chaos. A loss caused chaos. And we have the tools. We don't know how to apply them. And so we helped each athlete understand when you're at your best and you're playing confident and free, from 0 to 10, 10 being I am so hype right now, 0 to 1 being like I am calm as a cucumber. What number do you land on? And then you wrote down all of the numbers that each athlete, felt their best, and you took an average. That's where 6.9 came in. And I think what that helped is recognizing that you're right. Each of us are different. And just because I present a 6 like Katie, I know Iana was at a 9 or 10, Piper was at a 10, and you just respected each other. And we knew if you're playing in that number or that zone, our team's going to do great. But we weren't going to force someone to get outside of that number because chaos and pressure were already going to add more to that. And so it was a great team exercise. It was specific to your team. It may not work for everyone else. I know Doc does familiar exercises as well. But Doc, what are your thoughts on hearing that story grow through adversity? We see it all the time with teams. This was a different exercise, but you kind of got on a Zoom with us after that loss with Slope. What's your input?
Just a few things. One is that exercise you're talking about is a couple of things. One is a communication exercise. So it creates this ability to communicate and understand that we're all different, but it's also an awareness exercise, because if one person's usually plays their best when they're hyped and they get really quiet, that should be a sign to my team that I need to help them. But that quietness means they're stressed. Versus another player, when they're quiet, that means I'm really good. And you get worried about them when they start to get fidgety or agitated. And so, because like Coach said, if you don't know what a person is at their best, you may assume the wrong thing about them, that, wow, they don't even care. They're so calm, or they're not fired up like me. But when they get fired up, if they are best at a 2 or 3 and now they're at an 8, they're probably not going to play well. So now when they're fired up, I got to be able to bring them back down. So there's so much to that exercise that was unique to the team, communication, awareness, but it was born out of what you said, growth through adversity. And I always say one of my all-time favorite quotes came from Tony Bennett, the Virginia basketball coach, after they lost to the number 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, first team to ever lose to the 1 seed. And he said, if you use adversity the right way, it can buy you a ticket to a place you could have not gone to any other way. And then, I always joke, I hate teams that are undefeated. I do. It's very rare a team runs the table, because imagine if the chaos had hit for the first time in the playoffs in the Final Four, and you didn't have time to process it, deal with it. We thought our team was fine because we just beat everybody. And then the chaos or the stress hits for the first time a team pushes us back. And we didn't realize we weren't great at that piece. Now you're sitting with a loss that ends the season. So I love teams that lose. I always tell coaches, I know you don't love it in the moment, and sometimes you lose a lot. And which is why I love our values-based second scorecard, because now we're focused on values rather than wins, losses. And, certainly your team, if you'd lost 5 or 6 at the beginning of the year, there would have been a very negative sign based on your talent. But losing a game here or there, you can see what Coach said. It was the best loss I've ever taken. And Jess is like, what? What did you say? It's the best loss I've ever taken. So that combination of growth allows you to create an exercise when you understand a team that's unique to your team, that led to better communication, better awareness, vulnerability, because that has to take place, and authenticity, which you said allows us to non-judgmentally look at another person and say, you're you, I'm me. I'm glad I have my strength. I'm glad you're different than me. And let's go. And so that's kind of what I heard, Jess, honestly, which was, you solved a problem, but you had a strategy, right? How many times do we talk about awareness of what we struggle with, strategy to deal with it? In this case, awareness that our team got into chaos, that we have a lot of different levels of how people are at their best, strategy to deal with it. Requires a lot of different pieces to it, but ultimately led to a team that was able to handle chaos. And the last piece I'll say, and I'll throw it back to you again, Jess, is what Coach said. Toughness under pressure. Maybe other coaches observe that in you. And I always one of the things I think we do best is be able to have people understand that we can train our brain like any physical skill, train our mindset. And how many coaches say, I need you to be tougher under pressure. I need you to calm down. But the team is thinking, well, if I knew how to be tougher under pressure or be calmer, coach, don't you think I would do that? And if your athlete said to you, coach, how do I become tougher under pressure? What's the most common answer a coach would say? I don't know. But if you're not tougher under pressure, so-and-so, you're not going to be playing for me. And so you don't give them the tools because, like you said, you're not supposed to know everything. So I think it's great when an athlete or a coach says, look, we are tougher under pressure because we train toughness under pressure. Like we train that. It doesn't happen by accident. Some of it happens in practice, the way coaches practice, and some of it happens through these exercises and teams talking and learning skills that help us stay calm, composed, and confident. So that's what I took from the last bit of your conversation, which is you basically said everything that you did was trainable. We did it. The outcome turned out to be a state championship, but even if it had not, we would have grown through that process as human beings, as a team. I'll throw it back to you, Coach Jess, and continue on with your conversation with Coach.
Well, I love hearing a lot of different perspectives. Doc and I talk a lot. And so very thankful he was able to jump in on a couple Zooms, meet the team. And we knew that your team would be successful. But how you wanted to be successful and who you wanted your team to be in this journey together. And let's talk about that second scorecard. When we talk about core values as a team, can you please share those 3 and then how you saw your team grow into those? Because I challenged your team really early on. And there was one of those core values that I was like, I don't know if this team can handle this one. Tell us more.
Yeah, I challenged them and I swear, they're like, oh, we're going to show you. Like you could kind of feel it in the room, but at the same time, they were like, she's not wrong. Like you could tell that they're like, this is going to be our thing. So we had our three words of our core values was driven. And these, we word shopped all of this together, but driven came up because they're all volleyball driven. They're all college bound and this is what they love to do. A lot of them will play on the beach team as well. They're just all volleyball all the time. So that one was, and they wanted to really work hard. They weren't going to shy away from the amount of work it was going to take. The other was powerful. And that one came about because we had one side of the room that was not one side of the room, but like a group that was like the word lethal, and another one that was like, well, but I'm kind of more harmonious. And so we had this harmony and lethal, and they went powerful. And it was like, yeah, because either way, it's a very powerful thing. You can be powerfully harmonious and still be a rock star on the court. And so that really clicked for all of them. And then we had Unified. And Unified was the one that was going to be the challenge, is could we stay unified through an entire season of ups and downs and adversity, different roles, things like that. And that really, and trust. So trust wasn't one of our words, but it kind of went into that. Unified is, could we really learn to trust each other? And that's what we saw in that slope match too, is we didn't trust each other. We didn't trust our training. We went back into some old habits. We didn't necessarily trust the coaching staff and what we were telling them to do. There was just it wasn't there yet. We wanted it to be there, and they wanted to be united and unified and really close. They wanted it. And I think that had to be there, is that want and desire to trust each other and to find that depth. And they knew it was possible. I don't think they knew how it was going to look or play out, but I think on some level they knew they could do it. And they wanted to do it because I think they knew that the key to their success was going to be within those core values. And I think Unified was going to be the one that they really, again, had to come around, because it was going to be a lot of trust thrown to a lot of different places, including me, as their head coach. So yeah, those were our values.
I'd say your team proved me wrong, and they really took in that unified, that mantra, that value that was now part of their core. How did that show up during season, and where did it start, and how did it finish? What did unified look like on the court? A lot of people can have values, but sometimes we don't always see those show up on the court. We don't know how to identify those. So what did it look like for your team?
I think for me, there was, a couple moments where we struggled in that, and the way they responded to it, we were still able to win through some of those kind of breakdowns in trust. But we identified that it still wasn't good enough. And so we kind of went back into, mindset or whatever, and worked on the communication. And then one moment for me was, two of my top players, my outside hitter and my setter, just had an exchange on the court that neither of them enjoyed. And they both texted me and said, "Hey, I really want to talk to the other person." And I was like, would I help out? And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." But I also encouraged them to talk to each other without me. I said, "Hey, I think this is something," because I knew where they both were at. And I was like, "I think you guys can talk through this one. I'm happy to help. But I encourage you to just go and talk to your teammate. Go talk to their friends. They really enjoy each other. Like, just go talk to her." And so we were walking into mindset, and we were going to talk about it. And I saw the two of them in the hallway, head to head, talking and then hugging and crying. And I was like, oh, it's happening. They're doing it on their own. And then they came into the room and shared that moment with the whole team. And like, they explained what had happened, how their feelings got hurt, what they just talked about, how they apologized to each other. And they're not anywhere near each other in the room. And they both start crying while they're looking at each other from across the room. They're like, "I love you. I love you." And like, I think in that moment, everyone saw how it can go, and how you can just tell your teammate, "Hey, if that was not awesome, I agree." And it was like, "I didn't know that I said it that way, and I'm sorry you heard it that way. And yeah, I love you. I know you'd never try to hurt my feelings. Yeah, I think you're awesome." And so I think that was a big moment for me in witnessing it. And I don't think it went unnoticed by anyone, that was different. Like most teams, none of that stuff gets talked about. It stays behind the scenes. There's back talking, and it just creates what we call drama. And it was so cool to just have that moment go, "No, we're not going to do it that way. We have the tools, and I trust my teammate enough that I can share this with her, and she's not going to be upset with me. It's not going to make it worse. I know that that's going to play out in a good way." And it was just really an example that was live and in our faces, and you couldn't ignore it. And it was very loud and powerful.
There's 2 call outs. So at the beginning of our time together, we talk about the 4 C's of the elite mindset. That first C is commitment. And I know I like to show this, Doc probably does too, he can chime in, but we show a video from the head women's basketball coach, Coach Carol Lawson at Duke University. And she talks about commitment. And she really talks about committing to each other. And if there's something, right, sometimes we call it a family, we call it a team, but there could be drama that could pop up. But can you commit to staying in relationship and not letting that drama continue to go forth and bleed into the next practice, the next game? And I think it's really cool to hear that testimony again, as you take us back to that, is they were committed to each other. And that in that moment committed to vulnerability. They committed to working through it. And who knew they were going to do it in front of everybody, right? But it worked for your team.
Yeah.
You didn't mention, hey, you need to hold my platform, or hey, I need to rep out 50 sets in a gym and I need to go setter hitter connection. You talk about relationships. And you're right, don't talk about that enough. Just as much as you rep something out in the gym, you can rep it out in relationships. And let's talk about the huddle really quick as well, because I think that goes into being unified. What was it before and what was it after?
In the beginning of the year, you mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So huddles they were always there, but not really tight. And, when we talked about how they would come into the middle, we always kind of had a transition word to move on to the next play. But not everyone always bought in. They didn't always come in real close. Maybe 5 of them did it. And, there just wasn't a consistency behind it. And so that was a big focus for us. And even in the state final, but every time we were in mindset, players from the sideline would say, hey, it's not good enough. It's not tight enough. You'll forget a person, or not everyone comes in, or their hands wouldn't be around each other. And they would have that feedback from the other players that weren't on the court, that were looking at them going, no. And it was cool because the ones on the court were like, okay. Like, they didn't go, oh, you guys are crazy. It was, okay, we'll make it better. And so in the state final, I had noticed on film, I'd been watching us for a while. I'd noticed that sometimes when we were under stress, their hands would come in because they'd start talking with their hands and talking to each other. And so instead of having their hands around, creating the tight circle, they were kind of talking to each other with their hands out in front. And so I said, hey, just use your mouth, like keep your hands around each other. And in that moment, you don't just use your mouth to communicate. Don't use your hands. You just, or, use your hands later. So that was kind of an adjustment that they had to make. And so we were still adjusting up into our playoff matches. It was still an ongoing thing for us. And in our last match in set 2, we were struggling. It wasn't great. And I stopped watching the volleyball for a minute and I just watched them. And I watched what they were doing and if they were in these huddles as we had discussed. And I noticed they were quiet on the court, which was one of we know we're struggling when they started to get quiet. And their huddle, they had this booty out scenario. They shoulders were in, but their keisters were kicked way out. And I was like, So in my timeout, I was like, okay, in your huddles, I need you guys to bring it in. I was tuck the butt in and I mean, hip to hip, get in. I'm like, I want the tightest, snuggly hug. And we talked about, one girl had brought up nice, warm hugs. And so I brought up Olaf from Frozen. And I was like, I need you guys to love you, a nice, warm hug in this cold gym. And just kind of tried to break the tension too. And just get them to focus on something completely different than the stress I could tell was kind of on top of them in that moment. Because volleyball wasn't going our way and our opponent was doing really well. And we were not at that moment. Not bad, but just you could tell we were not quite together. So I focused on that. And then so going into set 3, they were kind of back together and really focused in on just being really, really close together and united in those huddles. And so the huddles for us were really, really really key. And they believed it and they knew it because they had felt the difference between being super connected in those huddles and being somewhat distant. And you can see it in their body, literally physical distance. Even though they're in a top hug, there was a difference. And so that was, a big thing for us. So yeah, those huddles were really important, even up into literally our last match.
Work in progress. And Doc, yeah. I actually showed O'Connor a picture from the Nebraska State Volleyball Championship. Omaha Skutt Catholic had captured their 9th state championship for Class B. And I had captured a picture. It was kind of a heads aerial view. The Skutt Catholic huddle was tight. But if you look off far into the right part of the distance, everyone stood on their bench and almost invading the court. And I know you and I had talked about this. Coach Sandra and her program, Coach Saunders and her program are very just great examples of growth and progress there. And I showed them that picture and they were like, why are you showing me a picture from Nebraska State tournament? And I go, what do you notice about it, team? And all the O'Connor girls just noticed, one, the tightness of that huddle, but also every person on that bench was up cheering for their team. And so I don't know, Amanda, if you noticed this, but after every single point that maybe didn't go O'Connor's way, your entire bench stood up and they all clapped at the same time. And it might have been a power up, it might have been a team reset, but I just thought that was really significant. And I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts too, Doc, on everything that she just shared. And you see this all the time.
Well, I still say to this day, it's probably the greatest thing that Skutt does. 5 years ago, I challenged them to stand on every point at state, even when it was 2-1, because they had lost the energy battle and lost to the 2 and 3 teams in the state the week before the postseason. And they went on to crush both those teams in the state. And then they've won 6 in a row or 9 in a row, but that was my first with them. And they've done it ever since and never asked them to do it again. They decided that was going to be part of what they do, is stand on every point. And if you ask the team on the court what that does for them, the confidence it gives them, the composure it gives them, the energy it gives them, and it's a difference maker, just like the intentional huddles are. So what I've heard was you talked about Kara Larson and why you commit to each other. What's interesting is she said how you commit to each other is build the relationships. Why you commit to each other is that teams that are family, teams that have great culture, they still have conflict. And I want great teams to recognize that every team has conflict. A lot of times people think, well, the great teams, they don't have it. They probably went all their way that year. And I want them to know that every team has conflict. It's just so we don't let it linger or fester, just like you talked about with your 2 athletes on your team. They could have let that linger the whole season, build into other little small hurts and anxieties, and they resolved it. They didn't let that conflict linger. So that's what really stood out to me about that. And it really led me to be thinking about a couple things for you, Coach, which was, I am really curious, whether it was this year or another year, what is the most discomfort you've ever had as a coach? And tell me about a time that you experienced your most discomfort and what you learned from it.
I really think in my coaching life, there was this moment, it was when I was coaching junior college, there was a moment where the needs of the players shifted dramatically. And the way I was able to coach when I first started was obviously the way I had been coached. And, I was not nice and it was really, fear-based. And, I did a lot of things that at the time were what you did, in any sport. It was you're tough on them, you run the heck out of them. It's, if you don't do this, you're on the line. That was me. And there was a moment in which players transferred out and I was like, I'm wrong. I could tell I wasn't connecting and I wasn't creating a fun environment. They weren't enjoying it. And I don't think I was enjoying it. Personal life for me was a little nutty. And, in my evolution as a human after that, it really got into my own self-growth. And it played directly into my coaching. And I really started to identify that I needed to change the way I was training and the way I was doing things. And I've remained, tough and accountable, but in a different way. And this year in this high school season, I just continued to develop that way. So they never went to the line. There was never a punishment. It was do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, try again, do it again. And it was like, here's your team goal and you can accomplish it. And I was really mindful to create, goals initially that I knew they could really hit. And then I made it a little bit more challenging as the year went on, as they got better at being a team, the goals got tougher. And then we just competed a lot. Most of the drills and whatnot that I did in the gym, we just competed, and the loss, they get points if they win the drill. And so there's a points board, there's an incentive, and, they love that because they're competitive. So they loved being able to do that. And so instead of it being a negative punishment, it was, you get a point on, and the reward for that winner is pride. Honestly, I think that's the biggest one, is to tell everybody, haha, I won. And it's, the prizes of, maybe a lotion bottle from Bath and Body Works. Like but that's not the point. That's cute stuff for them. But honestly, I think they love the fact that they won, and they like to rub it in. And it could be won by anyone. So it didn't always go to a starter. It might go to anyone. And that's a nice source of pride for them as a player that maybe doesn't get on the court. They still get to win something else within the gym. So just really moving to a more positive reinforcement instead of literally none of a negative punishment type response to anything that we did. Just a lot of encouragement, and keep it up, and make errors, and let's make big, gigantic ones, and then get better at it. And just really took that fear out of the equation entirely.
Yeah. So what's so cool is if you could have seen from my vantage point, the way your emotions changed when you were talking about that time period that was a little darker, because it really reminded me, and Jess knows this, of, really one of our favorite coaches of all time, Coach Booth at Creighton. But she shared a story of when she looked into her huddle and she got blank stares and she felt she had lost her team. And it was a moment of, it was that moment that kind of led her to reach out to me, because it was different and it was painful and there was emotions attached to it. And you could see it in your own discussion of it, like it took you way back to that place. But then as you started to talk about now, how much you went right back to this smiling, kind of really optimistic coach. And yet what I love that you said, and then I'll have one more question that I need to ask you, but is that what all you really said is you have found, or you're finding, this balance between love and accountability. Being positive does not mean you're soft. And a lot of times people say, oh, well, you're positive psychology docs, you're soft. No, it's not about being soft. It's about finding the balance between the accountability piece and the love piece, because, again, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if it's all fear-based, you get a joyless, burnt-out team and a joyless, burnt-out coach. If it's all love, you get a chaotic team that has no discipline. You need both. It's the hardest thing for a coach and a group of leaders to figure out today for 100 different reasons. And you're figuring that out. And that's what I love. So here's my last question for you. I think it is anyway. Beyond what you've said already, can you put into words the impact that Coach Jess has had on you as a person and on your team?
It's been hard for me to find words. I'm not going to lie, because so much of it is an emotion. And sometimes emotions for me, I don't always have the best way of describing them. So, the thing that I can tell you is it was the most enjoyable season from top to bottom, that included a season of having players struggle with their role, having players have conflict, but watching all of them come together and want to learn about each other and genuinely have fascination and interest in why you feel that way and how can I make you feel better. I feel like watching them become stronger young women, but compassionate and empathetic, and truly out for the whole group, and not just an individual, I want this, and if I don't get it, it doesn't go well. I'm not going to be happy. They were happy with everything. And Jess's role in that was so huge because she taught them how to do that. She taught them the tools and the importance of why it matters. And she was able to get them to buy in to her and the tools and why it matters. And we didn't have that resistance of, oh, it doesn't work. Even in our first session, we had some players that were willing to be really vulnerable and use their voice and share how they felt. And right in that moment, I feel like the rest of them went, oh, this is what we're going to do? Okay. And little by little, player by player, they fell into the big gooey hug that kind of became our team. And so, yeah, Jess's ability to come in, and they were always so excited to see her, of course, really that touchstone of, y'all are great, you're doing great, like, keep it up. Like, I feel like they're pleasers, as most of them are, and they wanted to make her proud. And, they did some really tough work to really make all of us proud. And I feel like she always gave them that validation too, of, you guys are doing great and you're crushing it, and I'm proud of you, and you're doing some tough things and you're doing the work, and just keep doing it, and if there's any, issues going on, them being able to call her or reach out to her, or me having that tool too, to reach out and say, hey, this is going on. What do you suggest? Because I feel like there's a mental component here, and I want to make sure I handle this well and within, the structure that she had created for us in the mindset for the team. I wanted to make sure I was consistent. And so the resource for everyone, players and coaches, to have someone like both of you and this program to just have a place to go that's not X's and O's, not my platform and my serving hand. It's my brain and my emotions and my feelings and the depth of me feeling. We had a couple players feel super disconnected at a moment, right? And they had a safe place to say, I'm feeling disconnected and I don't know why. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's find out. Let's bring it to the team and see if they can help. And then what can I do as your coach to help you? Like, these are huge things that you've got 14 through 18-year-olds doing together. What a magical thing to do. But it needs guidance and structure and leadership. And that's Max Out. And it gives us as coaches this amazing resource for ourselves and our athletes and our teams. And it's all built through, confidence, that toughness. It's confidence. In the game of volleyball, it's confidence. So how do we build confidence if we beat them up? No, we teach them how to grow it. Self-talk. I mean, just that alone, you can, how hard it is for them just to say something nice to themselves. And then we double down as coaches, giving them, something more. And it's like, again, it's this big reworking and a reteaching of how we think, and knowing that, our brain's going to shoot out a pretty nasty message sometimes. And we can either decide, power of choice, to go, yes, brain, I agree with you, or no, take a hike. I don't need that right now. And I'm above that now, right? I don't have to listen to my brain that's going to tell me negative things. But until you have someone teach you how to do that, you're going to keep doing it. And so that's the value of Jess and Doc and Max Out, is it gives all of us the tools and resources to be better.
I love that. That's awesome. Jess, you have to love that. But you imagine that the group of her athletes were the lethal stone cold killers turned into gooey hugs, because you can do both. That's what's so cool about it. I do have one follow-up question, and then I'll turn it back to you, Jess. So because you said sometimes you struggle to put words into things that have emotions, when you sat in that room and you first saw your two athletes, outside hitter and setter, communicating in the hallway, crying, making up, hugging. They come in the room, lots more tears, sharing their story. What were the emotions going through your brain as you heard your two athletes working through a conflict on their own, but then sharing it with their team, and the emotions that were going back between the two? What was going on what were your emotions?
Oh my God, it's a grin you can't get off your face. I was so proud of them, knowing who they are and having known them for a few years. That was a huge maturity moment for both of them. And then showing the group how mature we can be in this moment, and look how we can handle it differently. You're just like, your heart grows in that moment. You're like, holy cow, like this is amazing. And I knew in that moment, like I said, that this was going to be different, that our outcome was going to be different. That moment was so powerful. And so, yeah, it's goosebumps in that moment, and you're just filled with this amazing feeling of, this is so cool. And what a magical thing to bring to them. And knowing that like they're going to go on to other teams now and have such a greater set of tools that will make them a better teammate. And, they're both going to be, they're college bound, and, they're going to go into their college seasons being able to communicate, more effectively, not have fear of vulnerability, and being able to share with a teammate, hey, this was really hard for me, instead of letting them just letting it beat them down in that moment, and just creating that resentment. And then that just festers into other stuff, and it grows from there. And having it just get stopped in its tracks and said, no, we're going the absolute opposite direction. Instead of feeding our negativity, we are going to just put a halt and do something different. It changed everything. And so for me, it was like, wow, we can do this so differently. And I knew that I could encourage anyone on the court, on the team at that point, to handle things differently. And we did. Like I said, we had a couple players through the year. One was kind of earlier on, I want to say it was October. And she was really struggling, but I listened to what she had to say. I listened to why she was struggling. And I was like, let's just lighten up for a second. So my next practice was fun. We played games that they love to play. We kept score, of course, because we got to put points on the board, but there wasn't a training. It wasn't like, we were just playing. And then we had beach courts at O'Connor. So we went out and played beach on a Friday. They played pairs and had a blast. It was kind of hot. It was still kind of hot in this, still in October. It was like 99 degrees, but they played beach, and they were like, when I told them, they were like, really? And I was like, yeah, let's go do it. They're like, this is amazing. It was like, yeah, I think they all needed it. I think they all needed just something different to break up the monotony, because they were grinding so hard. And so I listened to her, but without her feeling like she could say something, and without her being vulnerable and telling me how she was feeling, I don't think I get to know that they were all probably there, and I can adjust what we're doing to meet the need of the group. And then my other one started that disconnection. Hers was role clarity. And again, she was able to, I noticed something was off with both of them, and actually came to them and said, hey, what's up? Because I can tell you're not your usual self, and I can tell something's going on. But I knew in asking them that they were not going to feel attacked or wrong. I knew that they could feel the comfort to tell me how, even if they were nervous in telling me, they still were able to tell me, this is my struggle. This is where I'm just not feeling good. Okay. And so then my responsibility is to help with the clarity. But in this particular second situation, she needed to go to her team and say, I'm sorry I've been so cut off and shut down. That's not fair. And I am in it for the entirety of the year. And I just didn't feel important. I didn't feel like I mattered. And they were all like, what can we do to help you? And the agreement was, she had kind of started saying no to things. They would say like, hey, do you want to go with us? And she'd say no. And I said, okay, here's the deal. She's going to say yes to everything. If you say, hey, you want to go get a John Badoo, she's going to say yes. If you say, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom, you want to come? She's going to say yes. And you guys need to just keep asking. Just keep asking, and she's going to say yes. And then that just brought them kind of, and there was tears and the whole thing. And they were all like, we understand. My player from earlier in the year that I mentioned said, hey, I was there earlier in the year. I totally understand what you're feeling. This is what I did. I connected with a couple other players and really brought myself back into the group. When I wanted to pull away, I chose to come back. Really, like, who couldn't ask for more? But again, if we don't have the tools, and if we don't have the environment that says I can say this, I can be vulnerable, and I can cry in front of my teammates when I tell them all of my insecurities, then I won't do it. And those pieces fall off, or they become what we call that dead weight, air quoting. They become that player that everyone feels like is dragging them down. Their energy's low, and there's not, and we've all been there as coaches and players. And now having a different way to handle it, and having an environment that says, hey, that's okay that you're feeling that way. Let's see what we can do to fix it. That's huge. That's what's needed. And I think with these new generations, that's what they have to do, is they just have to learn to talk and articulate and put their feelings into words so that we can understand what's going on, so we can help.
Communication, connection, vulnerability leads to what we call ultimate trust. And that's what you're talking about. Coach Jess, put a bow on this beautiful conversation today. What else do you have to say or think or ask?
Yes, no, I'm honored to obviously work with Doc and the mindset team, honored to serve you, Coach Amanda, and then work with the O'Connor team as well. And I circle back to this key phrase that we learned from the greats, right? Our U.S. Olympic women's volleyball team, Karch and crew. He talks a lot about out-teaming. And that was one of the videos that we saw from that U.S. team that won gold in Tokyo. But what does that out-team mean? We use our second scorecard, which is our core values. And then we win the energy battle, which is unique to each team and how we do that. You talked about huddles, but this thing called out-team. And your team had a lot of egos. And I loved it, because that was the cool part about it, is they became mindful. They're authentic. They lived through that second scorecard because we knew that they wanted to win. Hands down, right? But instead of being so results-based, we got them to fall in love with the process. And in that process, right, we always use that second scorecard as accountability of how are we living up to being driven, unified, powerful? Are we trusting? And so I just wanted to call out one thing. There is a pretty good meeting where I just had a moment where I had felt like your team needed to hear how proud of them I was. And it wasn't based upon how good of grades you got. It wasn't based upon how many assists you had or digs or, kills. It wasn't based upon your win-loss record. It was, for one moment, can we pause? And for all of our listeners too, and I know, Doc, we have so many faithful ones. I think they need to hear it as a coach, as an athlete, even as a human. You have someone that's so proud of you that it's not outcome-based. We're proud of you for the growth where you're at right now. We're proud that you're willing to work your mindset. You're willing to be better 1% every day, and you're willing to be able to be vulnerable with the community. And for those that need to hear it, we're proud of you. And this is not an easy journey, but when you see others like you and your team embark on a mindset journey, it provides something really special, because you create hope. You create a testimony that it can be done in a different way. And it's always a work in progress. So thanks for joining us today and sharing more. I think we could talk for hours. But my last question for you is this: what's one word? And I know we talked about the scorecard, it has to be different, but if you were to recap your special season, what is one word that comes to mind to describe that journey?
Oh, Lord. One word to describe the season, that journey we had. I think that is the word. I feel like journey is the word. Because it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had, ups and downs, and, I can't say we had, I think that match was our down, peaks and valleys. But I feel like we were on this journey of something we were climbing together in some uncharted territories, because I've never done this before this way. They've never done it before this way. In high school and like a college season is so short and compact and finite, where a club is this longer the animal. So this is just such this short, compact season where there's one ultimate goal, which for us was winning the state title, and then our journey to that, and our journey of a lot of growth as volleyball players, teammates, coaches, everything. So I think for me it was just this really outstanding, amazing journey. That's a really good word for it. I think that's kind of when I tell people, I'm like, it was just this beautiful journey. And it's hard to describe unless you lived it with us. But but here are some of the things I can tell you about it. But it was a really remarkable journey that had obviously a great ending. But I even going into the state finals was like, regardless of how this day ends, this has been an amazing journey with this group, this wonderful experience that we all got to have together. So regardless of what our outcome was, it was still incredible.
Doc, what are our 3 goals usually for every team that we serve?
Yeah, it's pretty clear, right? No regrets, right? Put yourself in a position to max out when it matters the most, and not wanting to take off your jersey when the season is over, hypothetically, because the team is so connected, right? And that is what I was going to say. Wasn't just a journey. It was a beautiful journey. That's how I would have their season.
And I think actually something you just said was something that we learned from as well, which was, I feel like initially they felt like we're going to do mindset and we're just magically going to be able to use it and it's going to just appear for us. And it's like, no, there's a mind. You have to remember to do to be able to max out when it matters most is not a guarantee. So when we lost that match, they were like, what the heck? We're doing mindset. Where's the guarantee? I thought we stamped this with a guarantee. And it's like, no, there's no guarantee. You do this work, and more often than not, you will find the success that you're looking for. And we're going to keep working it like a muscle. It's just not a magic pill that you take. And then you're good at it. It's just, you have to keep developing it just like everything else. And those messages were repeated to them, the no regrets and everything you just said about this is something that we just continue to do. And we know that over time, it will be there when we need it. And so that, kind of that blind belief of knowing it'll be there when you need it, and knowing that it's not a guarantee, but it does put you in a really great position when you need it. And that's true. And I think once they're like, okay, so this is something I have to keep doing. Yes. And those were those messages that kept coming to them every day. And then, yes, the not taking your jersey off. And I even asked them, did you guys sleep in it? And they're like, wow, I was so stinky. But, I carried the game ball home. I had to put it by my bedside. Like, I had that game ball and it's not going anywhere. I was like, that is like, there was just some things that were super precious. But I think we all felt that like this was something really unique and special.
Wow. Thank you so much, Coach, for sharing your journey, sharing your story, being vulnerable with us about what happened in this beautiful journey with your team. That was not, like you said, it wasn't all roses. There's challenges along the way, but I think that gives other teams kind of hope and belief that, the teams that win it all don't have these seasons that all go their way. There are things that happen along the way that help them grow and turn it into a beautiful journey. And so we really appreciate you sharing your vision, your journey, your trust in Coach Jess and the Max Out Mindset process, and sharing it with our audience, who is a group of high-performing athletes and coaches, particularly in the female sport world, and more often than not, female coaches, because they want to learn from the best too. And Coach Jess and I felt that you were one of the best, and we wanted to get you on to share your story and journey. So thank you for taking the time out of your week to visit with us. And we look forward to many more exciting times together.
Me too. Thank you guys for everything that you do and the time and the commitment to the team, to me. It's just incredible to have that level of support, and coaches have to have a growth mindset too. And we have to be vulnerable with them. There's a level of giving them some of your background, your deep thoughts, your struggles, your trials, and sharing that with them, to know that you're all in it with them, and they're not the only ones being vulnerable in that moment. And they're not the only ones learning to do things differently and new. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. So thank you guys for everything that you do. I attribute so much of our success this year to what we did with Max Out and what we were able to accomplish together.
All right. Coach Jess and Doc, signing off on the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook, or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You are listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.